Tensions are rising in one of the most hotly contested regions on the planet, the South China Sea.
Leave immediately and keep her off.
Chinese warship is cut in front of an American destroyer in an unsafe manner in the Taiwan Strait.
Chinese fighter jet intercepted a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft over the South China Sea and performed what American military officials are calling an unsafe maneuver.
Did you know that there's a small island made from a volcano located just off the southern point of Japan called Magashima? Magashima is only 3.2 square miles in size and has a population of 0. So why is it so significant? Here is actual footage of the island from January this year. As you can see, these are construction workers arriving to the island, and their task? To create a couple runways on the island and storage units for potential weapons and supplies. Japan is turning this empty island into a military base. The island is being built by Japan, but the creation of the military base is closely associated with America. America consistently does military drills on islands thousands of kilometers away from the all-important South China Sea. Now, with this military base being built, the United States can do military drills close to two countries in particular, Taiwan and China. Magashima is just one of the many islands that are being built up by military hardware, and the United States is just one piece of a chain of militarized islands located in South Asia. Is this military build-up a form of defense or aggression? And of course, it is all being built around the center of Chinese aggression toward Taiwan.
China may be one step closer to attacking Taiwan, staging massive military exercises miles off the Taiwanese coast. Senior defense officials in Taipei say 12 Chinese warships surrounded the island, simulating a sea and air blockade for the second time in 8 months.
2023 is panning out to be a transformative year for US military aggression in Asia toward China, some saying it being the most transformative year in a generation. When you look at the 2022 US National Defense Strategy, you can see some commonalities, and that is of China. It may seem as though the US is absolutely obsessed with the country. Why exactly is it? Essentially, it's because China is bullying its neighbours. China's activity in the maritime arena, most commonly referred to as the South China Sea, has been largely against any international law. It claims absolute sovereignty over those zones, which is filled with natural resources. When you look at the law of the sea, codified for decades in the United Nations Convention of the Seas, it is pretty clear on most things. Countries have territorial seas stretching 12 nautical miles off their coast. Islands do too. Countries also have resource zones that stretch at least 200 nautical miles. Theirs alone to fish, mine, and harvest deep sea riches. Every state can fly, sail, and operate in waters beyond the territorial seas and pass freely through straits. Although China is part of the UN, it basically breaks every one of those laws. For instance, China exercises regional veto jurisdiction in maritime resource zones by blocking Japan, Vietnam, and Philippines from developing their oil and gas fields unless they accept Beijing's terms. China's maritime policies have opened the door for other states to clout their rules, inviting a world which international law had little relevance at sea. China's so-called 9-dash line casts a net over almost the entirety of the South China Sea, denying Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines access to the maritime resources that international law allocates to them. This area is full of natural resources, including gas, oil, coral lime, high silicates, sand, quality gem, natural pearls, fish, birds, and sea slugs. Not only the control of the area gives China full control over most of the important shipping transportation routes and a group power across the whole Asia-Pacific.
For the United States, this reflects a broader shift. After a decade in which we fought 2 wars that cost us dearly in blood and treasure, the United States is turning our attention to the vast potential of the Asia-Pacific region. In just a few weeks, after nearly 9 years, the last American troops will leave Iraq.
After the war and terror in the Middle East subsided, Asia became the most important region for the US. America's pivot to Asia was planned more than 15 years ago, as the rise of Chinese aggression became apparent. Nowadays, the US is creating a militarized wall in the form of islands, creating heightened conflict between the two superpowers. President Xi urged the military to deepen war and combat planning to increase the chances of victory in actual combat, renewing his calls to troops to safeguard China's sovereignty and territory. The United States is the most powerful military in the world. It largely sets the rules. However, China, according to the State Department's words, are in the process of rapid modernization and expansion of its military. And of course, much of China's military is being focused on Taiwan, an island that China has claimed that it will take over one day, and an island that controls most of the world's microchips. China is the only country that could challenge the United States in international norms and the creation of rules. Hence, Taiwan and China are critical for the US and the future of the world. The US military is very present in the Asian region. They have 8,000 troops located in Guam, but 100 bases in Japan, with 21,000 troops situated there, and 24,000 troops in Okinawa. Now go to South Korea and you'll see 22,000 US troops. And of course you have Singapore, which is a major base for the US Navy. Southeast Asia has been militarized for the past couple decades by the US. But what now, as we are seeing a more aggressive China? Well, a lot of the US plans is to partner with its allies in the region which share the same goals to deter and contain. The US and Japan are collectively arming the islands south of mainland Japan with long-range missiles, long enough to reach mainland China and Taiwan. It's essentially a wall that China would have to get through in order to reach the Pacific Ocean. With collective military drills, the message is clear to China that Japan and America are ready to respond to any direct attack on Taiwan. Japan is even planning on doubling its defense spending, including more and more weapons. And to make things interesting, 97% of those weapons are coming from the US.
A near collision between a Chinese and a Philippine patrol boat in the South China Sea has exposed the feuding that still exists between the countries over disputed territory.
China has been aggressively demanding Filipino shipping and fishing vessels out of their waters, claiming sovereignty over the West Philippine Sea. In 2014, the Philippines allowed them back into the Philippines after 22 years. It's a very strategic location. Here's the Philippines and here's the South China Sea. The goal of the US setting up bases in the Philippines would give the US the military presence it would need to be a strong deterrent against Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. The US have developed more and more military bases on the island, further expanding that military wall toward the south. The US now have 9 bases in the Philippines, up towards the north of the country, strategically closer to Taiwan and of course China. If you look at the military wall that the US has created, you see that it has a huge military presence, up from Japan down to the Philippines and also down south to Singapore. From the beginning of Biden's presidential term, he has said 4 times that the US military presence would defend Taiwan in the event of conflict, but its aides insist that American policy has not changed. Since the US ended formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan in 1979, it has avoided declaring whether it would deploy military forces to defend Taiwan. This is known as strategic ambiguity. The US has set up a military wall from Japan down to Singapore, also not to mention the strong military bases in Guam and Australia. The US is very much acting aggressively against a very hostile China, which is definitely attempting to control the balance of power in the South Asian region. With militarized zones so close to one another, we will have to wait and see whether actual conflict occurs. At the moment, we can expect a region with very high tension. Let us know in the comments below whether you think the US and China will end up at war.